The ANC has officially handed over the cadre deployment documents to the Democratic Alliance. The DA has been in a 3-year-long battle with the ANC over the records that date back to January 2013. The party released a statement after the 5 p.m. deadline was met, saying that they will now study the cadre deployment records to see if the ANC has complied with the court order. Let's now get some reaction to this story. We speak to Accountability Now's Director, Advocate Paul Hoffman. Advocate Hoffman, good morning. Thank you so much for making time for us. What do you make of at least the ANC saying that it will adhere to the order, and there you have the documents that have been handed over? We're not too sure as yet if it is all documents, as the DA said that will comb through the documents, but there are documents that have been handed over to the DA.
Yes, the ANC is obliged to comply with the court order, just like anybody else is obliged to comply with the court order. So it is a good thing that an attempt at compliance has been made. There's going to be a dispute about the minutes of the meetings held between 2013, when then Deputy President Ramaphosa took the chair of the National ANC Cadre Deployment Committee, right through to 2018, when Didi Mabuza, the new Deputy President after the Nasrec elective meeting of the ANC, took over from him. And the minutes of the meetings on Mabuza's watch have been made available via the Zondo Commission. And what is interesting about them is that the minutes of the very first meeting of the Mabuza-chaired deployment committee refer to the minutes of the previous meeting at which President Ramaphosa presided. Now, the ANC is saying that there are no minutes during the period when he was chair, and he has said so himself on oath at the Zondo Commission.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a lot of interesting to and fro about whether minutes exist in respect of the period when President Ramaphosa was the chair of that committee. But the other documentation, the CVs, the exchanges of emails and WhatsApps, should enable the DA to piece together what was going on in those cadre deployment committee meetings.
Yeah. So if the DA is able to prove that actually there were records that were being kept by the deployment committee of the ANC and that they lied before the Zondo Commission that they do not have those documents, would there have been an offense that have been made?
Yes, the offence is perjury. You cannot go to a commission of inquiry, take an oath, and then tell a story. You have to tell the truth when you're on oath, and if you don't, you've committed perjury. And the person who will have committed perjury, if there are in fact cadre deployment committee meeting minutes for the period 2013 to 2018, is President Ramaphosa himself.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one for me, Advocate Hoffman, because even the State Capture Commission of Inquiry's report on the deployment committee refers to, for instance, how President Cyril Ramaphosa, when he was testifying before the committee, said that the committee didn't discuss the deployment of judges. However, though, the Didi Mabuza records actually show that there were discussions about the deployment of judges, but then there was no charge of perjury.
No, what happened with the Mabuza did not give evidence at the.
Yes, I'm speaking about the deputy president of the ANC at the time. So Cyril Ramaphosa tells the commission that they didn't discuss the deployment of judges, but the records then show that actually the committee does discuss the deployment of judges.
Judges, yes. No, that certainly happened when Mabuza was in the chair. Whether it happened when Ramaphosa was in the chair is still an open question at this stage.
Yeah. The other issue is the statement that was made by the ANC that was released yesterday. They say, furthermore, precaution have been taken in order to comply with the provisions of the Protection of Personal Information Act to protect the personal information of those who have not given consent for the release, for its release. The DA is saying that they intend on making these documents public. Would the DA also have to comply with the POPI Act?
Yeah, I don't know that the POPI Act is in fact applicable here, because the terms of the court order telling the ANC to make the documentation available do not refer to the POPI Act at all, and the reason for making them available is to enable people who lost out when they sought work in the public administration or in the state-owned enterprises to attack the validity of the appointment process because it was being run by an illegal cadre deployment committee rather than by the duly appointed structures of the Constitution and the law that are required to see to it that good human resource management practices are put in place in the public administration.
Now, let's look at what the State Capture Commission of Inquiry's report has found on the deployment committee. Essentially, it argues that the committee itself is unconstitutional. It goes further to speak about the Public Service Act. No appointment, promotion, transfer may be made or affected or decided upon outside the prescriptions of this legislation, and those prescriptions are equality and other democratic values and principles enshrined in the Constitution. So this speaks to the core of the case that the Democratic Alliance wants to eventually bring before the court. So what do you make of this? And now that they actually do have the minutes, would they be able to actually show the courts that here we have evidence that there were the discussions that have taken place, even though the Zondo Commission has already found that the committee was unconstitutional?
Yes, you running together the constitutionality of cadre deployment and the effect of cadre deployment in individual cases. It's long been held by the courts, going right back to 2008, that cadre deployment in the public administration is invalid and unconstitutional and illegal. So that is the law, and the law has been confirmed by the findings of the Zondo Commission, which came to exactly the same conclusion as the courts did, and that has left us in a situation in which both the Commission and the courts have already struck down cadre deployment as invalid, and then after that court order, the ANC decided not to appeal, but instead it put out that the cadre deployment committee doesn't actually do the appointing. It simply makes a recommendation, and the legal structures in place under the Public Service Act and so on are then engaged in order to get to where you want to get with the recommendation, either take it or leave it. Now, the minutes show that these recommendations aren't really recommendations at all. They're binding, and you ignore the recommendation of a cadre deployment committee at your peril. So just to come back to the constitutionality point, the DA has already launched proceedings to assail the constitutionality of cadre deployment, and the matter has been argued before a full bench in the Gauteng High Court, and it is expected that judgment will be given in that matter before the end of the month, so you and I will have something else to sink our teeth into on the constitutionality aspect.
Advocate Hoffman, just quickly, what people would argue is to say that, but deployment happens everywhere, and sometimes having to make the distinction, but under the Public Service Act, there are certain conditions that need to be met, including, for instance, the argument around transparency. But yes, there are positions in the state that you can have a political person being deployed or political deployees. Just quickly give us the distinction between the two.
Yes, the general rule is that you have to be fair and open and put good human resource management practices into place when you are employing personnel in the public administration and the state-owned enterprises. That's all set out very clearly in Section 195(1) of the Constitution. But when it comes to political appointees, now this is somebody who is advising a minister, perhaps a DG, that sort of position, then in that case you can use political considerations when you are seeking the services of a special advisor.
Yeah.
But in general, the law is that everybody must be given a fair chance to get a job in the public administration by applying to the relevant legal structure. And the use of cadre deployment, which essentially limits the field to those cadres who are willing to put their hat in the ring. And that really means that the public administration is drawn only from the ranks of the ANC, which is wrong,
yeah,
and unconstitutional.
And, of course, that is the test as well that is before the courts. But thank you so much for your time, Advocate Paul Hoffman there from Accountability Now.